entire career counseling team, teachers, students, and those parents who have been able to join us today. This 5 day long career counseling Mela kick-started yesterday, and today, on the second day, we have amongst us Dr. Samir Srivastav, who is senior lecturer of HRM and Organization Studies in Swinburne Business School in Australia. Prior to joining the Swinburne Faculty of Business and Enterprise, Samir sir was a postgraduate fellow at Bonn University. He had earlier served in the Indian Army as an infantry officer for over 11 years and also freelanced as a management consultant. Sir has taught across a range of subjects including organizational behavior, strategy, knowledge management, human resource management, and entrepreneurship. He currently offers a postgraduate course in strategic HRM. His research area, of course, is HRM and organization studies, and he is also accredited to supervise masters and doctoral students as principal supervisor. Sir, we welcome you today to the session, and now it's over to you for the because the students are waiting eagerly for the knowledge that you are going to pass on. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Manisha, and I also want to thank your principal, Colonel Prem Prakash. He contacted me the other day and said that I might be able to, offer some insights about what it is like studying overseas and maybe share some things that I know about management being an academic in that area. So you've already introduced me. Thanks for that. I just want to mention that I and Colonel Prem Prakash, your principal, go back a very long way. We studied in the same school back in Dehradun. Sir was a couple of years senior to me, though I never had the pleasure of serving with him as in under him in the army. We were in different battalions. But I was commissioned in the Bihar regiment for 11 years, and I served in a Bihar unit, and I spent some time in Danapur close to Patna. So yes, so we have something in common there. Right. So what do I want to talk to you about today? I think I'll have to, it must be around 10ish there, right, in India. I'll have to leave at 11 o'clock. So in this about 1 hour time, what I plan to do is talk a little bit about what it is like studying overseas and the sorts of issues you should take into consideration if you were to decide that. From my experience interacting with some parents and students who sometimes, though we are not really involved in recruitment of students, but sometimes they see me as an Indian faculty member and come over. And so some of those questions which they ask me or the mistakes they make, I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I want to share some insights on management, some tips which will be useful to you, or not tips so much, some points of learning perhaps. And the whole idea there is to give you a flavor of what it is like to study management if that's the route you'll take after your grade 12 if you choose to do your undergraduation. So those are the two things I'll be doing. What I want to do is maybe share my slides with you. Is that okay? So let's slide. Okay. Okay. So I take it you all can see it now? Yeah. Okay. So look, I thought I'll begin by kind of telling you that, your I know perhaps from grade 9 and some of you are in 10, 11, 12, if I'm not wrong. And those of you who are in grade 12 will soon be making a major decision around what you want to do, whether it's medicine, engineering, or do your graduation and do other things. And, you know, at times students are confused about what they want to do. And I'm hoping you're not only confining yourself to just medicine or engineering or and nothing wrong with that. But be open to all other possibilities and don't ever think it's the end of the world just because you haven't managed to get into that engineering college or a medical college. There's much more to life and there are heaps of options. And at times it's okay to be confused, right? I decided to follow another career after about putting in 11, 12 years of service, and I wanted to do something different. And look, I don't like to talk about my age, but I'm definitely 50 plus, and I'm still confused about what I want to do. So it's okay to be confused. All right. The only thing I'll tell you is if you decide to go overseas, or even if you're in India and you're planning to, uh, select whatever profession you want to be in, just ask yourself, what are your strengths? Will you really enjoy doing it and follow your passion? And in that sense, I'm sure all of you have seen that movie, Three Idiots. And I think, that movie makes a great point that finally you will do well if you follow your passion. And that is one generic advice I want to give you. So, how do you know what you're good at? Just be open to possibilities and try lots of things. Don't foreclose option. And people often ask me which career has maximum scope. Should I take accounting? Should I take finance? Should I do HR? You know, there is scope in everything provided you're passionate about pursuing that, and success then follows you. So don't ever rule out something just because you feel the job prospects are not great. If you're good at it, things will fall in place for you. So, okay, what is the point I'm trying to make here? I thought I'll capture what I want to tell you by using the 3 R's. And of course, I'm not referring here to reading, writing, and arithmetic, as you know, the 3 R's, but I'm calling them reputation, resources, and return. What do I mean? The first thing, if you decide to go overseas after your grade 12, and if you want to do your undergraduate abroad, you want to decide on which university you want to go to. Okay. And I'm looking at it, frankly speaking, globally, whether you want to, and I'm assuming you'll want to go to an English speaking, nation. I mean, I know, in fact, my own niece is doing medicine in Germany, so that's also possible. But I guess most of you will end up considering the UK, the USA, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, right? These are the main countries. And by all means, look at all of them. And I'll talk a little bit about what you should consider when you select a country. But reputation of the university you go to, you want to check that out. Now, not all universities in all these countries have a great reputation. Let me tell you that, right? So there are certain universities, I would say, or certain education providers whom you might call dodgy. Okay, so don't think that just because you're going overseas, you're landing up in, a great university. So how do you find that out? I notice that in India, you have lots of these recruitment agents which universities have appointed. And I'm sure there are some excellent recruitment agents, but just like there are dodgy universities overseas, not all of them, some, there must be some dodgy recruitment agents as well. So you want to do your homework if you're going to take advice from your recruitment agents. One recruitment agent I can recommend, no conflict of interest here, IDP, not that I know anyone. I say IDP because I know that all Australian universities actually own that agency. You know, it's a global agency now, recruiting for students, for universities in Australia, US, all these countries that I mentioned. So IDP, you can't go wrong with them. Okay. So that's, and take their advice. They will likely to be instruction, and you want to be careful. You're going to a university and not some polytechnic kind of college which they call technical institution. Or if you're going there, you want to be sure that you know what you're getting into. If it's a diploma, is it vocational education you're going for, or do you want to get a degree? Because there are times where people have ended up doing a course thinking they're going to get a degree and they end up getting a diploma. Such sorts of horror stories also I have heard, not so much in Australia, but in other places. If you come to Australia, there are about 39 odd universities and it's a very well regulated sector. You're not likely to find any dodgy university in Australia, though, there is a reputation angle in the sense that some universities are more reputable than others. But apart from that, if you're going to a university in Australia, you can be pretty confident that you'll get reasonable quality education. Now, you want to differentiate between universities. I've mentioned their academic ranking of world universities. Just Google in ARWU rankings. Take a look at that. There is Times Higher Education ranking. You can take a look at how the universities are rated. But remember, at times there can be world famous departments or disciplines that universities are doing well in. Okay, so for instance, my Swinburne University in Australia, it has an absolutely world class offering in astrophysics. So it's world leading in that area. So if you want to do something in astrophysics, then without hesitation, I would say its ranking is second to none. Similarly, different disciplines, certain small niche areas, different kinds of universities could be doing well in, and therefore there is this thing called QS World Rankings by subjects. So if you want to, find out the specific area that you're interested in, you can actually look at, how universities are rated on that specific area that you're interested in. That said, see, at an undergrad level, as long as it's, because not all of us can get into Harvard or Wharton or, Oxford University. So, and it's perfectly fine. You can go into a slightly lower rung university. There's no problem, especially for an undergrad education. So don't be too fixated by that prestige element, okay? Because by definition, only very few of us can get into these highly world ranked institutions. While you should try, but remember that there are, and believe me, I've interacted with students from universities all over the world and academic staff. Yes, there might be some difference in the quality of students in a class, but the difference is not huge. If you don't get into, say, Harvard, and if you've gotten into Harvard University, not a lot of difference in the quality of education that you'll get. Okay, right. So that's the bit about reputation. Reputation of your recruitment agent and reputation of the university that you're going to get into. Apart from that, the next bit, resources, and by resources I mean your resources, and when I say yours, I suppose your parents, because they will be bankrolling your education. You want to be careful about it, okay? Because it is expensive studying overseas. One of the mistakes which people make, if you've if you see there, I've said, yes, tuition fees you want to weigh, because different universities have a different fee structure. Normally, the more prestigious universities tend to be slightly more expensive, but on the plus side, they also offer scholarships. So you want to do your research on that. There is health insurance, health costs if you fall sick. If like Australia has a very, very good system and there are no problems, but I don't know about other countries, so you want to be careful about that. But I put a question mark around living expenses because many a times parents ask us, sometimes I get an email from a concerned parent saying that I'd sent my son and can you help him because he's not able to get a job, and we were told it's easy to work, you're studying and then living expenses. You want to be careful because that's not always possible. Okay, so that's the risk you'll be taking. So you take your ability to earn your living expenses as a bonus. If you can do it, great, but at least if it's a 2-year or a 3-year program, at least for the first 12 months to 18 months, you got to go with the assumption that you'll not find any work. Okay, and I'm talking mainly about Australia, but I'm guessing that'll be true in most of these other countries as well. It takes time to find your feet, and and depending on what city you are in, if it's a metro like in Australia, if it's Melbourne and Sydney, chances of you getting some work in a McDonald's and all is much greater than if you were studying in a regional area of Australia, say Geelong or somewhere close to Adelaide, where there might not be enough job opportunities. So living expenses you want to really think through, okay? And of course, do your research, but don't rely on being able to work while you're studying. That's high risk. Okay, going because you want to immigrate, or do you want to return to India after completing? Okay. And so after completing your studies, if you're returning to India, then you want to factor in your employability back in India. And I'm hoping that when some of you go overseas, you also want to go overseas because you want to learn, get exposure, and come back and start your own businesses. You can be an entrepreneur and you can create employment. Why always work for someone else? And there are so many success stories of youngsters doing it. So nothing risked, nothing gained. And in India, we have a good support system. So even if you fail as an entrepreneur, your family is there to support you. So don't be afraid. Think big. India needs, passionate youngsters who believe in something, starting their own business. Because remember, business is not only about just earning money and you want to become rich, but businesses as an entrepreneur, you create employment for others. You are giving something back to society if you run your own organization very well. I know you all are very young and you must be thinking, hey, I have to earn a living first. I want to get a job. But look, you don't have to always work for someone. With your education, you can make others work for you. And when I say for you, I'm saying, it is about a business is about creating value. Right? Solving a problem, producing goods which people need. So, doing business can be highly noble if you look at it from that point of view. So that's one if you want to return to India. But if you want to stay back in a country, then you want to check out on immigration policies of various nations. And, I'm giving you a very broad overview here, but whether it's Australia, New Zealand, and even the US, you've seen how things have been changing. Immigration policies can change on a dime. Again, when you go abroad, go with this notion that yes, you want to make it happen. If you want to immigrate, if you try hard enough, it'll happen. But if it doesn't happen, if policies change, it's not the end of the world. Okay, there are lots of options. You can go to another country, you can return to India, and because immigration policies change, you can later get an opportunity. So just keep that at the back of your mind. Okay, the other thing about studying overseas that I want to talk about is, these days we are talking about onshore and offshore delivery models. So, for instance, an Australian university is getting into some kind of an alliance with a university in Malaysia or in China, and India has recently opened. The policy still we are studying, and I think they've opened it to a certain class of universities who can come in, and they can get into alliances with universities in India. And what another option which I expect will soon become possible in the Indian higher education sector is doing 50% of your subjects in India or from wherever, 24 subjects. Okay, so you do 8 subjects per year. So 3-year program, you'll do 4 subjects per semester, 8 subjects per year, and 24 subjects over 3 years. So you can have 8 units being offered online, 8 units you do in India, and 8 units you come to Australia in that university and do it. So those kind of options will be there. So different models, and especially after COVID, people have learned how online works. Even think about it. I suspect you all are having this career mela online. Why I suspect? I'm pretty sure it's because of COVID, right? And so, different kinds of modes of education are becoming possible. The other thing which people are talking about, still not, I don't think it's gained traction yet, but there are these modular offerings where, you can have 5, 6 different universities saying, hey, you can pick up any subject from us as long as you do 24 subjects, you design your own degree, do these 24 subjects, and we'll give you a bachelor's degree. So you can say, hey, this university, great lecturer in economics, I want to do a unit in economics with this person, I want to do management with Samir Srivastava from Swinburne, and things like that. So you can so that's a modular offering. Different modules you can cut and paste and design your own degree. Okay, right. Apart from that, the other thing I want to talk about, before I get on to sharing some insights on management, the sorts of things I talk about in my class, is to tell you that you're thinking about your own career, depending on whichever direction you choose to take. You might be in India, you could be overseas, wherever you find yourself. What you're likely to see over the next 2-3 decades, and that's when you'll be in the prime of your career, I suppose, most of you, it's likely to be a very different world where we are talking about, and different, I get it that different nations will advance on a trajectory at different pace, the industrial development. But people are talking about artificial intelligence and robotics. So, as you know, artificial intelligence is about when things start improving without human intervention, then the question is, what are humans doing, right? So, no, I mean, there are all kinds of scenarios. I'm not saying humans will not be necessary, but what will artificial intelligence, robotics in manufacturing, what will that do to the world of work? How will work change? And I put in there UBI. I don't know if you have heard of this abbreviation. It's Universal Basic Income. And lots of experiments have started taking place, and I expect this uh, to perhaps become, public policy initiatives in most countries where they are in the developed world, and gradually, I'm sure, eventually India will also become a developed nation. We are a developing economy. You will have universal basic income even in India, and it's likely to happen earlier, perhaps in the West, where you're not income tested, so everyone is given a certain amount, right? So there was, I don't know if you're aware, there was uh, in Sweden, was it, where they wanted to give 60,000 US dollars to every family. Just take it free of cost, because that will ensure that you have, basic healthcare, basic needs to educate your family, and, essentials for living, basically food and housing. So they calculated that if they give everyone that much, at least these basic needs are taken care of. So the question is, and in a very different context, he says that if you look at how power has shifted, and initially power belonged to who were physically powerful, the caveman, the jungle man, the lord, who literally beat everybody to pulp, because if you didn't follow him, there was no hope for you because he could kill you physically. He was so powerful. And so power belonged to this guy. And then humankind discovered agriculture. And so you had feudal lords who owned large tracts of land, and they had feudal armies, right? So that's the feudal feudal lord soldier you see there. You know, feudal lords owning large tracts of land and having their feudal armies. Power had shifted to them. And then, along came the Industrial Revolution, and it was no longer about owning large tracts of land, thousands of acres. It was more about owning those means of production, factories. So therefore that chimney stack I put there, mechanical means of production. And so power shifted again to industrialists, right? From feudal lords, from agriculturalists to industrialists. People like so Tatas and others in India, Jamshedpur in your state has a very famous industrial facility. So look, power has started shifting again towards the end of the 20th century, where power has shifted to people who have knowledge. So think about it, the likes of Microsoft or Google or Amazon, they don't, compared to the industrialists of the past, they don't own a lot of physical assets. It's mainly the resource they have is the brain power of their employees. Okay, so power has shifted to people who have knowledge, and if that's the case, there is one interesting point that Alvin Toffler makes, and I think it has a lot of implications for how we manage and organize. But I want to leave you with this thought that the thing about knowledge is you can't put a barrier around it, right? So if you look at this slide, this jungle caveman, physical power, feudal armies protecting a large tract of land, a physical asset. Even industrialists, you own physical means of production. But if you think about the companies of tomorrow, Airbnb, the largest hospitality operator, doesn't own a single hotel. Uber does not own a single, largest taxi operator in the world, doesn't own a single car. So how is that becoming possible? And I put it to you, that is because there are new business models and people have started organizing around a major source of power, which was, the brain power of its employees. And that alone is enough. You don't need physical assets. And so that has, very different implications. It's a global talent pool in your context. If you have, if you can plug and play and you have that knowledge, you will be hired wherever you are. And that's coming, it may appear that walls are going up, and you saw in the US, Trump did want foreigners to come and all those sorts of things. But things will gradually change, and just we have free trade, there will eventually be free trade of labor. And if you have the skill sets, you will be in demand. Okay, because you can't put a boundary around knowledge. Okay, the other thing I want to share with you, and this is about of the ways you want to plug and play and you want to acquire knowledge. And if the area you choose is the area that I have specialized in, management, why study management and why is it important? Stuff like human resource management, organizational behavior, how people behave in organizations. That's my specialty. And this is one of the first slides I share with my students of my undergrad and postgraduate classes. So I thought I'll share it with you. There's not, though I know you're in school, but there's nothing you'll not be able to appreciate here. if you think about it, businesses are about making profits, right? Making money. And so, yeah, that's a dollar sign
I
there.
just wanted to
Yeah.
check. Dr. Sameer, just a sec.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I think I'm getting audio. There are one or two people are checking that there is no audio at their end. I don't know, it must be problem at their end, I suppose.
Yeah,
Just let me check. Advita,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah,
It is how it is, sir.
it is there. Manisha, you are getting audio? There is one Srijan Kumar. Srijan, are you getting audio?
We are getting audio, sir.
Advita? Eh?
We are having audio.
Yes, sir. It is pretty clear, sir.
It is clear. Yeah, okay, Sameer, please carry on.
Okay, sir. So I'll just finish with this slide, sir. So what I wanted to say is here, if you see, businesses are about, generating profits. So I've said accounting, finance, those kinds of disciplines are interested in, basically following the money. If it's a product focus, whatever it is, service or a product that you make, if you either it's from a scientific angle, it's research and development, try and develop that product, or if it's a product you're trying to sell to the market, marketing folks come into the picture. If it is about production processes, you're looking at quality control, business process re-engineering and things like that. But if you think about it, whether it is a product or a process, finally it's right. And even if you go into robotics and all, it's people who will be essentially in charge or designing robots, or we'll not go into artificial intelligence. I'll digress. But the issue is that you'll often find that you can easily reverse engineer a product. Okay, competition, my competition is making this, let me also understand it, reverse engineer it and make it. I can copy someone's marketing strategy and say, hey, my competition is doing it, I can have a similar strategy. But the one thing you cannot is a play or a workplace culture, right? Because people come together, they have relationships. You can go to different schools, but you'll agree with me that your particular school in your class, that can't be replicated anywhere, because there are different kinds of students. The way you all interact, the culture of your school is very different. It's unique to your school. Same thing is true of organizations. And so if it's people whom you have to manage, remember, human resource management is not about, guiding people or telling them do this, do that, acting like a cop. When you manage human resources, you're not managing people per se. You're managing the resources that people possess. Okay? Human resource management is about managing the resources that human beings possess. That's the way to look at it. And what is the biggest resource that we have? It's knowledge, right? It's what's between our ears. And that is what human resource management is about. How do you get the best out of your people so that they can use the knowledge they have to produce great stuff for you? Okay. And of course, so what I'm saying is the lower hanging fruits, accounting, finance, even to a large extent, production processes, marketing strategies, those most people, most businesses can do a good job of. To really manage your people well so that they want to get up early in the morning and come and work for you, and create a culture which is very specific, which is a very productive work culture that others cannot copy. That is what will give you sustainable competitive advantage. So in management, when we talk of competitive advantage, we talk about doing stuff better than what others can do. So you have a competitive advantage. You understand that. Sustainable competitive advantage is doing things which the competition cannot copy easily. And what I'm putting it to you is that if you manage your people well, you will create a kind of work culture that the competition cannot copy. And that will enable you to gain sustainable competitive advantage in the workplace. I'll stop here because I want to give you all 15-20 minutes to talk and discuss things with me. But I wanted to give you a flavor of the sorts of things we discuss in our management class, and I'm hoping this was useful to you. So I'll open myself to questions. I'm all yours. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was very perceptive. I'd like to take up questions. I'm looking forward in my family business. What would be a better career option for the same? Should I take up finance or just management? I need a good, I need a good command of finance, taxation, and management. Is there a course that covers it all?
You know, you were echoing. I could not hear the full question. But is it about the student wants to ask me whether they should study finance or, yeah, please repeat the question actually.
Oh, okay, sir. Can you hear me properly now? Can you hear me now?
Advita, there is a bit of echo. I hope only one of your devices are working. Are you on laptop or mobile
Yes, sir,
or both?
only one of my devices. No, no, sir, only one
Okay,
of my devices
please
are
repeat.
working. I because of the
Okay,
I'm looking forward into my family. So should I put it in the chat box?
Yeah, please do so. I will read it out. Please do so. Dr. Srivastav, in the meantime, there is a question by Mohammed, that legendary real estate entrepreneur and
right.
45th President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump, never have we need a business degree.
That's a great question, really. Look, I am not saying that uh, everyone needs a business degree, but you know, when we talk of cases, people often talk about Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, others who did not have a degree and yet they became great entrepreneurs and were very successful. I kind of want to mention that there is a success bias here, because think of so many others who have degrees and have gone on to become great entrepreneurs. And also, there are many who don't have any formal studies and don't do very well at all. So you cannot extrapolate, you know, from two, three, four examples and reach conclusions. The fact is, a good business course, uh, you know, whether in entrepreneurship or management and others, will give you a lens or different tools to better understand the phenomena. So I'm not saying it's necessary, but it will certainly be helpful in most cases. So I don't know if I've answered your question. Yeah.
Yes, so thank you, sir. I think that was seriously an interesting question, and the answer was equally interesting. The next request is, would you please correlate? Would you please correlate strength and passion that helps one to be passionate?
I'm not entirely sure I've understood the question, but uh, how do you know you're passionate about something? If that's what you want to know, I guess you got to ask yourself, if you look forward to doing something, you know, that's what you enjoy, then that's one indication. That said, oftentimes, there is a tendency to keep doing stuff that we are good at. And oftentimes, because we keep doing only stuff that we are good at, we ignore other areas. So I am actually, I've my own children study in an Australian system. If you ask me, as far as schooling is concerned, the good schools in India, such as your school, they are doing a brilliant job, and they give a much more broad-based exposure to the school children, So you have much greater opportunity to realize whether you prefer arts, history, geography, science, math. Whereas in Australian schools, that kind of broad-based exposure is not there. So how do you decide what you're passionate about? I guess you have to do things and discover. There is just one point I want to make, that there is a bias when we think, and uh, I often, when I discuss with my management students, I feel that there is a bias towards thinking and then doing. Okay, so that makes intuitive sense. We must think through, weigh our options, understand what's there, and then do stuff. But you know what? If you actually study what's going around you and you observe, oftentimes you have to do stuff to clarify your thinking. It's not think and act. At times, you have to act to clarify your thinking. Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to fail. That's how you'll discover at times what you're good at. You tried something, you tried to do, at least you learned you're not good at this. So that is another way you'll realize what you're really passionate about and what works for you. So I've tried to kind of imagine what you wanted to ask me. I hope I ended up answering what you
Yeah,
wanted.
Yes, sir, it was a very comprehensive answer, sir, and I think it would help students think in a way that we need them to think, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir, the next question is from Madhav. He wants to know how to start a startup and take it public, and also how to manage board members.
Wow. Look, see, for every nation, you have different, legal requirements. You have to register a business and get a. Uh, so there is this legislative angle about registering a business. You know, so I guess I can talk about what happens in Australia. There is something called ABN, Australia Business Number, and each state has a business registration authority, or you can incorporate it. So there is and you can actually apply online and register your business. I know it for a fact that India has been trying to improve its ranking in ease of doing business. So it should be possible. I must confess, I'm not aware of how it works in India, but in most states these days, it should be possible to go online and register your business. You got a business registration number. You might, or there might be lawyers there who can help you to incorporate your organization. Maybe that's the way to do it. You will need some legal help. you know. And your other question was how to manage board members. Look, that's a question around governance. That's a whole different area of business where essentially it's a good question you ask in the sense that once you're a large company or an organization, the CEO, the chief executive officer also has to be answerable to somebody. And so you have a board of directors who actually hold that business to account and, you know, ensure, especially if you're a publicly listed company, the shareholders' interests have to be taken into account. Uh, uh, and it's not only shareholders, you know. These days they talk of multiple stakeholders. So as a business, you owe something to the society. You must have heard of corporate social responsibility. You're doing a lot of charity work and other things businesses are doing. Uh, and you owe, you know, you have to be a responsible employer. So in that sense, your employees are your stakeholder. Your suppliers, people whom you buy stuff from, people whom you sell, your customers, they're all your stakeholders. So the board of directors are supposed to look after the interest of everybody. So they hold the executive of the business to account. And how do you manage board members? You don't. Board members actually manage the executives. Yeah.
Sir, related to the startup only, they also want to know about the financial aspect, that how to get investors and venture capitalists to invest in startup.
Yeah, and look, those are the sorts of things in your degree in entrepreneurship. They tell you how to make a sales pitch or an elevator pitch. My suggestion would be, so you look, if you have a great idea and you don't have money, you have to learn to make a sales pitch. Have a business plan where you make projections about how you hope to generate, you know, everyone as an investor or a business angel, we all want returns. You know, if someone is going to give you 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, or a bank even is willing to give you that loan, they want to be convinced that you can service the loan. You'll be able to return that money. And if you're going to a business capitalist or an inventor, you know, business angel, they'll want to know how much rate of return are you promising. So you got to know how to make a business plan. So there is a proper, if you Google how to write a good business, get a good idea how to make to an investor, where you say, this is the product, how will it be different? Why do you think people will buy it? And usually, one of the things, especially if it's a slightly large project, they want to know whether you have your team, the quality of your team, you know, are they A grade or not? Do you have, because it's seldom one person. So if the 3-4 people, what kind of skill sets they have, what are they bringing to the table? It's not easy. Look, let no one ever tell you that making money is easy. It's hard. You'll have to convince people, you'll have to try. But look, if you have a great idea, just back yourself. Because if you won't back yourself, no one else in the world will. So that is one advice I want to give you. I will. Prem sir, I'll have to leave in about 3-4 minutes because I have a meeting starting 4:30 my time. So I may be able, but one thing I can do, I'll be able to take one more question perhaps. But if you all can, I know it's perhaps not ideal, but if you all can even email me those questions, you know, on the what people are asking, I will either video record my reply and send it, or key in my response and send it to you all later. But I can take one more question.
Okay, so I'll go back to the question which Advaita had asked you, that I'm looking forward into family business. What would be a better career path for the same? Should I take a finance or just management? I need a good command on finances, taxation, and management. So is there a course that covers it all?
Yes, very much. So, you know, you can do a double major in management and finance both. You can do a Bachelor of Business, which will cover finance and management subjects both. Absolutely. At a bachelor's level, several degrees which will give you an exposure to both. And if you really wanted to go deep into finance, you can do major in finance and accounting. Even there, you'll get some exposure to management, but a lot of stuff on finance and math. So there is something called double major and things like that. Okay, where you might have to do 4 additional units. So, but you can still do it in 3 years because they have winter and summer offerings and things like that. Okay.
Okay, thank
So,
you, sir. And I'll now, sorry.
yeah. No,
Sir, I would request Colonel Prem Prakash, Principal, sir, to sum up the entire session. Sir, over to you.
I am just trying, this audio and video simultaneously.
You are on mute, sir.
Audio video is playing throughout.
yeah, but better, sir. Prem sir, as I was saying, I got to leave in a couple of minutes. I got a meeting at 4:30, but sir.
I think it is again switching off. So Manisha, you please carry on.
Thanks a lot, sir. I hope something at least was valuable. I hope. All right.
Sir, it was definitely a very good and enriching session. And since there are some questions which the students would want more clarity on, we would definitely be disturbing you with those questions, and at your leisure kindly answer back, and we'll be communicating it to the students. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the valuable time. We appreciate it very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Prem sir. Thank you, Manisha. Bye.
Thank you, Manoj sir. Thank you, Advita. Advita, you need to check the internet. I think there is some issue.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, I think the room is echoing. The room, because of the room, this is the classroom, it is sounding like that.
Oh, okay. Okay, anyways, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.